thanks for being here. It's good to see so many people. Good to see my students. I should thank my dad. My dad is visiting from Philadelphia. He came. My wife brought him. So thanks, Dad. My students are going to applaud for you, I think. You can go ahead. Yeah. And I'm sure we have a number of Notre Dame grads here too. So maybe the Notre Dame grads, kids are telling you have to identify yourself. Maybe the Notre Dame grads want to raise a hand. All right, great. Welcome, thanks for being here. My name is Bernard Prusek, and I hold the Smiley Chair in Business Ethics here at John Carroll. I'm one of the co-sponsors of this event. This is our 2025 Hesburgh Lecture. The other co-sponsors are the Notre Dame Club of Cleveland and the Alliance for Catholic Education, also known as ACE. Thanks to the club, and especially to its president, Vicki Main. I'm not sure if Vicki's made it quite yet. She had something come up at work. And to Kyle Tomczak, who helped organize in this evening's event, and Kyle is here. Kyle's both a Notre Dame grad and a John Carroll grad, the latter for his MBA. Thanks further to Frank Olin. Is Frank here yet? Another person who's running a little bit late because of work. Frank is an executive coach for ACE and the superintendent of schools for the Diocese of Cleveland. So welcome everybody to John Carroll. The Hesburgh Lecture Series is a way for Notre Dame clubs to share a bit of the richness of Notre Dame with alums and friends. The series is named after the legendary Father Ted Hesburgh, who was president of Notre Dame from 1952 to 1987. Kyle now will introduce our speaker. Thanks again. Oh, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Clemens Sedmak is a professor of social ethics and a director at the Notre Dame's Nanovic Institute for European Studies at the Keough School of Global Affairs. Before coming to Notre Dame, he was the F.D. Maurice Professor for Moral Theology and Social Theology at King's College London, and he has held multiple positions at the University of Salisbury. His areas of expertise include Catholic social teaching, social ethics, theories of justice, epistemology and ethics, and philosophy of religion and religious studies. He's the author of multiple books in English and German. Please welcome Professor Sedmak.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My first time in Cleveland. First time at John Carroll University. So the start of a series of visits, I hope. I'm from Austria originally, so just that you can place the accent. And Bernard said that we should leave 20 minutes for Q&A. So it's 6:34, which means at 7:25 we should come to an end, correct? Then we have 20 minutes for Q&A? That's about right, yeah. The topic I chose is, what does it mean to respect a person's dignity? I'm interested in that topic for a number of reasons. One is I teach Catholic social teaching in Notre Dame, and a mandatory course for our Master of Global Affairs students called Integral Human Development. The current class has 44 students from 27 different countries, and they come from all walks of life, and you want to offer them something that they can hardly disagree with. And so human dignity would be a candidate of a value where it is difficult to disagree with. And many students from different faiths or philosophical or whatever traditions would say, yeah, I may not agree on the justification of human dignity, but I respect the fact that we talk about it as a value. So as you all know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from December 10, 1948, talks about human dignity at two places. One is the preamble and one is Article 1. And I'm not saying that the document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is perfect. At the time, there were only 58 member states and many countries were not represented. Most of Africa was not represented because of colonialism. Nonetheless, it is a very impressive document, and we would not get the same quality of document would we try today. That's very clear. And so the 30 articles are preceded by a preamble. And the preamble talks about the inherent dignity and the fact that the recognition of this dignity and of the rights of all the members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. And then it also says, well, we have not done that. The Universal Declaration is obviously influenced by the atrocities of the First World War and the Second World War. And so against the background of these atrocities, the declaration was necessary. Little footnote. Wherever I go, I apologize for being from Austria. It's not a very prestigious country to come from. And I think you don't know the name Natascha Kampusch, and that's good that you don't know the name. She was a girl in Austria who was kidnapped at the age of 8, and then for 10 years kept in a basement somewhere in Austria, and then she was freed. And I was in King's College London at the time, and there was an article in one of the British newspapers, something like an op-ed, and it said, "Austria, what's wrong with this country?" And then they said Austria started the First World War, the Second World War. They have all these people in the basements. So it's not a prestigious country to come from. And when I mentioned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights based on the atrocities, First World, Second World War, Austria has a sad role in that to play. If you look at the preamble, I just want to make two very simple observations. Number one, the experience and the history play a major role in our discourse on human dignity. You can tell many different stories about human dignity, but there is a way to remember the past through the lens of human dignity. And quite often the way we remember the past happens through a dignity lens based on atrocities. Second observation, I would claim that we would not have the discourse on human dignity without the experience of vulnerability. So we are vulnerable beings. Vulnerable beings means we have bodies that can be damaged and hurt and killed. We are also wounded beings, and we are morally vulnerable in the sense that we cause harm to others. So there is this multiple sense of vulnerability, which is part of the discourse on human dignity. So that's the preamble. As you may know, the preamble is, for lawyers, not always the most prestigious or the most important aspect of a text. So René Cassin, a French lawyer who was involved in the drafting of the text, wanted human dignity also to be part of Article 1, the first of 30 articles of the Universal Declaration. And these are the two sentences that make up Article 1 of the Universal Declaration. You have all seen it before. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They're endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Brotherhood meaning, women included, I guess. And I would like to make two observations here as well. First observation, if you look at the language here, human dignity is connected to freedom, connected to equality, connected to rights, connected to reason, conscience, and something like a spirit of brotherhood. So human dignity in this very short text is already colored by many other values that play an important role in our understanding of the value. Meaning you cannot speak about dignity without thinking about freedom, equality, rights, reason, and conscience as well. And so I just give you one example, the connection between dignity and reason. I am interested in social ethics. And within social ethics, the older I get, the more I'm interested in hell. Hell, H-E-L-L, hell. And so I'm interested in the moral imagination about hell. And there are many different examples I could give you, but we don't have the time for that. But there's an interesting novel by one of the most famous Albanian authors, Ismail Kadare. Truth be told, he's the only Albanian author I know, but anyway. So one of the most famous Albanian authors, Ismail Kadare, and he wrote a novel called The Palace of Dreams. And in this novel he said, I want to describe hell. And he described hell a little bit like King's College London Strand campus, if you've ever been there. King's College London Strand campus is built on a former subway metro station, so it's a maze. It goes 4 floors down. It's like 9 different buildings cobbled together, Strand campus. And so he talks about a ministry of dreams where a person is employed and you give this person a dossier of acts and papers and tell the person, you take these papers, you take the second staircase, turn left, turn right, go through, turn right again, go through the room, and then in room 642, you hand over the papers and you are not allowed to ask the question why. You are not allowed to ask the question why. And this is hell on earth if people are not given reasons. So we can create hell on earth for our children when we educate our children. And since ACE is represented here, pedagogues, teachers can create hell on earth for their students by not providing sufficient reasoning. And that's a dignity violation in the sense that you honor a person's dignity by honoring the fact that the person is endowed with reason. So this is my first observation to Article 1. You see these connections between dignity and the other values. The second connection is the following. It is a beautiful text. I like this text. However, there are certain gaps. The most noticeable gap is, of course, there is no justification for human dignity. There were different drafts leading to the current text. Some drafts had a justification for human dignity. And there was one early draft that used the Jewish Christian justification for human dignity because the human person is created in the image and likeness of God. That didn't survive. Then there was a draft, by their very nature, human beings have dignity. This didn't also survive because some delegates felt nature is a vague concept and it doesn't help us. For the longest time, a series of drafts, the second sentence was used as a justification of human dignity. Human beings are equal in dignity and rights because they're endowed with reason and conscience. Because. And then this also died the deaths of many qualifications. And the main argument against using the second sentence as a justification for the first one is very obvious. Why would you not justify human dignity based on reason and conscience? That's the question. Is that taken from my question? What's the obvious argument? I will go.
Babies don't reason.
Yes, yes. People in a coma, babies, people with brain damages. I mean, you have many members of the human family who do not have reasoning capacity. And that was an argument already introduced during Immanuel Kant's times, because that's his justification. And his response was, by the way, as long as you have a critical mass of people endowed with reason, the others can kind of, parasitically participate. So what we have now is gap number one. There is no justification that we agree on why human beings would have human dignity. And so we pretend that we have. But if somebody tells me I don't believe that, there is not much I can do. The status of the human dignity discourse here is a postulate. Postulate means it's good to think that way, but we cannot prove it. So that's gap number one. And Jacques Maritain famously said, as long as we don't talk about why we have dignity, we can have a wonderful discourse. So that's gap number one, no justification. Gap number two is the language here leaves the question of the range of dignity open. What about the unborn life? What about a person after his or her death? Would a person who just died, and some of you may have had this experience, you are in the room with a person who just died. I've had that twice in my life. And this is a person. The person is not alive any longer, but it's not a table. It's very different from an object. This is my father who just died. And does my father, after his death, have human dignity, yes or no? The language here leaves it open. And of course, for Catholics, a very important question is, what about the dignity status of the unborn life? The Catholics have a very clear response to that, obviously, but the response is not something that you can deduce right from this article, okay? So this is the second gap that you can see, and if you want, the third gap would be, what would it mean to enact human dignity? I'll come back to that in a second. So we see that the preamble and the Article 1 have some very important messages, but there are some gaps as well. Now let's look at one example. Let's look at one example, and I would especially ask the students to help me with my question at the end. A Swedish woman, in describing her experience raising her son Fred, diagnosed with autism, recounts a particular scene. Once my mother had looked after Fred for a night, and I came to the farm to pick him up. She had tied one end of a long rope around his tummy and the other end around the trunk of a big tree. She had a lot to do, hanging laundry, and couldn't stop doing all the chores around the place. The first thing I saw was my little 4-year-old, my baby, a captive, tied down with a rope. He was pulling at the rope that restrained him. I saw red. I was used to not showing my anger and quietly went over to the tree and turned him loose. Her mother inquired whether she was upset. Yes, I damn well am, I said indignantly. Do you have any idea how awful it seems his being tied up like that? And the mother's response, yes, but it was the only way for me to do anything but watch over him, and I don't honestly think it harmed him one little bit. Question, has Fred's dignity been violated? Yes, why?
Because he can't really speak for himself or necessarily control it, so it seems like it went against his dignity.
Deprivation of control, that goes against his dignity. Anybody else? 3 more. Yes, please.
Just because he's not able to maybe vocalize it, it's hurting him, doesn't mean that it isn't hurting him?
Just because he's not able to vocalize it doesn't mean it does not hurt him. So you would say because of him being harmed or potentially harmed, that's a dignity violation? Yeah? 2 more. 2 more, please.
I think his dignity was preserved and protected because that was the way that you could protect his life and safety and care for him and set a boundary on the behavior he might not be able to control.
Thank you. So the argument here is no dignity violation because of safety considerations. Maybe a last one? Yes, sir.
First dignity was violated because his mother entrusted his care to her mother, and her mother left him outside in the tree by himself and the woman around him. So not taking care of him.
Okay, yeah. So we have 3 yes and 1 no. We will not take a poll here. But it is one of those questions where I just talked to Bernard. I have an interesting hobby. I mean, I think it's interesting. Nobody in the room would think it's interesting. In my sleepless nights, I look at Article 3 decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, especially if there are dissenting opinions. I'm really interested in that. And so you have the judges who have to judge whether Article 3 was violated or not. And Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights says, no one shall be subject to torture, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. That's the dignity paragraph in the European Convention of Human Rights. And the judges have to decide whether in a particular instance the dignity of the person was violated, yes or no. We philosophers, and I say we, Bernard and I, we can endlessly debate that. And it's fun, to be honest, to debate it endlessly and having no pressure to arrive at a conclusion. The judges have to decide. So we, the students and us, I mean, we can have our intellectual discourse, which is stimulating, I like that, but we don't have to make a decision. The judges have to make a decision. The decision cannot be, oh, maybe or maybe not. I'm sure you're brilliant. Students at John Carroll University are brilliant. That's my working hypothesis. And there's one price to be paid for brilliance, and it is it's very hard to commit to a position if you know the complexity of the issues. I'll give you one anecdote from Notre Dame. We once had Dennis McDonough as a visiting professor who was the chief of staff of Barack Obama's second administration. And he came to my Master of Global Affairs class and told the students, your task is to write a memo for the president with the question, should the number of refugees the United States accept be raised from 40,000 to 80,000? And then he said, and don't say, on the one hand, on the other hand, it's complicated, the president knows that. And for the students in Notre Dame, this was such a hard assignment because brilliant people will say, it's complicated, it's complex, there are many facets, it's true. But you have to commit. And so has it been violated, yes or no? This is one of these complicated questions. And I just give you a few ideas what you could consider when you think about it. One is your own positionality. From where are you speaking about this situation? Each one of us has what I call a dignity biography, a certain history of dealing with the concept, being exposed to the value, having thought about it, our share of dignity violations committed or suffered. So we have our dignity biography, so we speak from a certain position. Part of that or connected to that is which are the reference cases that we can use. And so the lady in the back basically said safety issues. And it depends what your references cases are. I have some African students who would say only thieves or goats are tied to a tree. So it is a dignity violation. Others would say, well, think of a playpen. Think of the many ways we cram children against their will into spaces, airplane seats, car seats, and so we constrain the freedoms of children all the time for the sake of safety. There is a photograph which I will not share with you. I have one brother, he is less than 12 months older than I am, so we are Irish twins, a word I learned in Notre Dame, we are Irish twins. And we were lively boys, and when we were 6 and 7 respectively, our parents went with us to Vienna, which is the only city we have in Austria. Do you know that Austria has one city? Close to 2 million inhabitants? Yeah! And the second largest has 250,000 inhabitants. By American standards, this doesn't even exist. But anyway, so we went to Vienna, the big city in Austria, and our parents were worried about our safety. And so there's a picture of my brother and me on a leash. My mother had us on a leash. And she was a tiny person, my mother, so I was wondering how safe we were. Anyway, so that's my reference case. So my approach to this story is very different than the approach of a person whose reference case may be thieves being tied to a tree. Okay? You can think about the intentionality. Had the grandmother the intention to violate the dignity of her grandson? The power dynamics, here is one who may not be verbal. Here is the grandmother, she's powerful, he has little power. He is an autistic boy, so the status is a status of special vulnerability. We do not know much about his subjective experience. I mean, our colleague here mentioned, he may not be able to verbalize it, but he may well experience harm and discomfort. What are the reasons for doing that? And the grandmother gave a reason. I have to do my chores. Would there have been alternatives? That's a very important point. Would there have been alternatives? So if there are alternatives, the burden of proof becomes bigger, right? If there's no alternative, then that's what you have to do. Those who speak Latin know there's this famous word, ultra posse nemo tenetur. Beyond what you can do, you cannot be held accountable. So I cannot be at two places at the same time. I just can't. So you cannot expect that from me. So there's no alternative. The question of harm, the question of the context, there is a difference between an institutionalized and a non-institutionalized context, and then the question of standards you would like to have. The question of standards. Now to make things a little more, so far so good? It's complicated on the one hand, on the other hand. The next summer, Maud and her husband went out for a picnic on Midsummer's Eve. Their parents took turns to save the food, the garbage, the stereo, the china from their son Fred, who would destroy everything he would get hold of. Maud recounts, I had packed everything with love and care, including napkins, a small Swedish flag, and tablecloth, all of no use. Why did I even try to make things nice and keep up a semblance of a festive mood? A dark rage came over me again. Fuck. He got hold of an egg and smashed it in his hand, threw himself over the rest of the food to find something else to smash. I helped him, threw an egg at a tree. It smashed. I didn't give a damn. His father said calmly, I've got a 30-foot rope in the car. Get it, I said. I'm not saying that this changes a whole lot, but it may change a little bit in the following sense. We philosophers are sometimes like the Pharisees described in the Gospels. We create heavy burdens for others to carry, but would not be able to carry those ourselves. So in my study, at my desk, I can think about standards that parents or grandparents with autistic children should have to abide by, but I don't know the reality of what it is like to educate an autistic child day in and day out. And there is this word of dignity hysteria. Dignity hysteria means that you make a dignity violation out of every little thing. And I would not encourage that because dignity is a precious concept and we do not want to have inflation of the word dignity violation. So in my humble opinion, I do not think that Fred's dignity was violated in this particular situation, but it's obviously open to debate. If I were a judge in Strasbourg, European Court, there may be debates about that. But the point here is, how realistic do you want to be in the expectations of your dignity standards? And it is, so we have 3 children. And my wife and I, we never hit our children. But we were quite often very close. And some of you may remember the adolescence days. As a perpetrator, as a victim, whatever, as both. And at least our children knew exactly which buttons to press to keep us going. And sometimes you fail. Okay, anyway. So we did not, but we were close. And what I'm trying to say here is, 365 days in a year can be long. If it's 366, that's even longer. That's a long year. And so we need to be realistic about what to expect from respecting a person's dignity. I have a positive and a negative approach. It's 5 to 7, 13 minutes to go. The positive approach is this one. I have a friend, mentor and role model, Paul Perrin. He worked for Catholic Relief Services for many years, and he did a meta-study on dignity expectations. Meta-study means he did a literature review looking at maybe 100 studies based on surveys and interviews asking people, what do you need to feel respected in your dignity? So that was the question. What do you need to feel respected in your dignity? And it's obviously a global meta-study, so all the continents are represented. I think 1.5 million individuals could have been accessed to this meta-study, and he came up with 4 important aspects of this is what people, globally speaking, need to see in order to feel that their dignity is respected. Number 1, acceptance of identity. In order for me to feel respected in my dignity, I need to be accepted in my identity. As an Austrian, as a Catholic, as a short person, as a father of children, you name it. And you do not want to be constantly in a situation where you have to justify your existence or identity. People with non-binary positionality want to be accepted in their identity, so this is number 1. Secondly, inclusion. In order to feel respected in their dignity, people want to be included in decision-making processes. They want to be able to participate. They don't want to be excluded, ostracized, stigmatized. They want to be included. Thirdly, acknowledgement. Acknowledgement meaning being recognized as a person and being respected in your rights. Respect is a very simple and very complex concept at the same time. We philosophers sometimes say to respect the person means to acknowledge that this person is a source of normative claims. A source of normative claims. And by that they mean the fact that you are sitting here means my agency is structured. I cannot pretend that you are not here. I should not spit on you, so I keep my distance. That's the minimum because you are here, and for me that I have certain obligations because of your presence. And so it should be. And so it should be. So acknowledging a person as a source of normative claims is a very basic understanding of respect. And the third point here, acknowledgement means you recognize the person as a person. And you don't pretend that the person is an object or is invisible or not even present. That's the third one. The fourth one is independence, autonomy, and agency. For people to feel respect and their dignity, they want to have an acceptable level of independence, autonomy, and agency. So you do not want to treat adults as if they were children. You do not want to tell adults how to behave. So we have one professor in the business school. I'm not saying the professors in the business school are particularly difficult, but it just so happens that this professor is in the business school. And when you leave the classroom in his course, maybe you have to go to the bathroom, you will lose points on your grade. Some students complain about that. His argument is, look, you're adults, and you should be able to control your whatever you have to control. My personal attitude is, you are adults, the students are adults, and you get as much out of the course as you put into it. And so I would like to respect your independence. Of course, I do have to look at fairness considerations as well, so I cannot give out grades, like ice cream. But at the same time, you choose how you want to inhabit the course and which kind of citizen you want to be. Point here is independence, autonomy, and agency to be strengthened as much as you can. In a nutshell, respect means 3 things, and that's from the literature. A person feels respected if she is seen in her uniqueness. So I'm not the token Austrian right now in this room. I'm also a unique person. Each person is unique. And paradoxically, we are all equal in the sense that we are unique. Since this is recorded, I will be very careful. we have a wonderful, amazingly successful, impressive institute on campus called the Notre Institute for Irish Studies. They have a lot of money, as you would expect from an institute on Irish studies in Notre Dame. And they tell me Ireland is special. And I say, yes, but so is Armenia, and so is Austria, and so is the United States. Yes, but Ireland is unique. And I say, yes, but so is Austria, and so is Armenia, and so is Iraq. So with all respect for Ireland, I don't think that Ireland is more unique than other countries. And in this sense, human beings, I mean, you're not more unique than your neighbor. I mean, we are all equal in our uniqueness. And respect basically means you are treated in your uniqueness and seen in your uniqueness, number one. Number two, you are allocated agency. And as you know, the moment you give agency to a person, this may involve certain risks. Have you maybe ever seen the book by Randy Pausch, Last Lecture? It's a very sad and very profound book by a computer scientist who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and knew he would only have a few weeks, most months to live, and he gave a final lecture at the university. And final lecture in his case really meant, this is my farewell lecture, I will be dead after that in a few weeks. Because normally we have these professors who retire, they give a farewell lecture and then hang around for decades, you know that. But anyway, he was 47 years old, and in his farewell lecture, which he basically gave for his small daughter, who would probably at the age of 2, not having any memories of her father once he passed, he wanted to give them the most important lessons he had learned in life. And one important lesson he had learned in life was support your children in their agency. And he said when he was 12, he wanted to paint his room. And his parents gave him permission to paint his room. And he said, wow, this was courageous from my parents. Because if you are 12 years old in the middle of adolescence with the brain construction things happening, many things could be done to your room, but the parents trusted him and handed the agency over to him. And so the point is, it's a basic way of showing respect for a person, but it comes with a risk. It comes with a risk. And thirdly, in order to feel respected, people want to experience fairness. So this is respect and dignity from a positive approach. Acceptance of identity, inclusion, acknowledgement, and independence, autonomy, and agency, or uniqueness, agency, and fairness. Good? Negative approach. So the negative approach to human dignity could look like this. Let's forget this. Could look like this. The minimum you want to respect for not violating a person's dignity is non-infantilization, non-instrumentalization, and non-humiliation, the last being the most important category in my opinion. Non-infantilization means do not treat adults as if they were children. And it happens quite often with people who don't speak the language very well. So my Spanish is very bad. I'm not proud of that, it just so happens. So when I'm in a Spanish-speaking country, people think that I am an idiot. I'm not an idiot, it's just I have bad Spanish. And so we see that with Syrian refugees in Austria, they are treated as if they were children, just because their German is not, on a fluency level. Refugees quite often get so-called pocket money. And pocket money is something that you would give to small children. So we do that quite often, infantilizing people. Medical doctors, not infrequently, infantilize the patients. And so we have those kinds of situations. Secondly, non-instrumentalization. That goes back to Immanuel Kant. Never treat a person only as a means to an end. I mean, we always also instrumentalize each other. I have a dental appointment on Friday, I'm already afraid of it, and I will go there and I will instrumentalize the dentist for my dental health situation. But I will not forget that he is a father of 2 children and a human being and a soul and afraid of hell. I will not forget that. So there's more to the dentist than the role that he at this point inhabits. And you can reduce people to roles they have. The third is for me the most important category. The minimum for respect and dignity is do not humiliate a person. Do not humiliate a person. I have 2 books here as examples, both from France. The left one from Anna Sam is written by a social anthropologist who financed her studies by working in a supermarket at the checkout. Meanwhile, it doesn't exist any longer, but at the time, there were real people at the checkout. And she graduated, didn't get a job right away, and wrote this book. And in this book, she said, you have no idea how often the interaction between the cashier and the customer happens without eye contact, let alone without a conversation. And I've seen it, and you have seen it maybe as well. People are on their phones, they don't even look at the person. And she says this is deeply humiliating, as if you were part of the cash register. The second book by Florence Aubenas. Florence Aubenas is a French journalist, and she became quite famous because she was taken a hostage in Iraq at some point. I'm not saying that's the reason why she wanted to be taken a hostage in Iraq, but it just so happened. And so she became famous for that. And then she wanted to find out what is it like to work in the low-income sector. And for 6 months, she worked with a cleaning company as a custodian. And she said, I was prepared by my colleagues, you are now a cleaner. Don't expect people to see you. In 2 ways. The night cleaner, quite often the shifts of the custodians are organized in a way that they do it in the hours before business starts. So I'm a morning person. I'm normally in the office at 5:45. That's just my habit. So I will still see those who clean our offices and the bathrooms. Those who come at 9 will not see them any longer because their shift is over. And they start at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So they're invisible in this sense. But even more so, they're invisible because people don't recognize them as human beings. And Florence Aubenas says, I remember a scene, I was vacuum cleaning an office, and the office was empty. And then a man and a woman came into the office, closed the door, and the man said to the woman, finally, we are entre nous, among ourselves, and can talk without being disturbed. And here she was with the vacuum cleaner and felt deeply humiliated in invisibility. And Axel Honneth wrote a very well-known essay about it, invisibility as a big way to humiliate people. There are many examples. Should we look at this example? Yeah, just briefly. Emma Reyes, and I think we would all agree this is deeply humiliating. She was a 7-year-old girl in a Catholic boarding school run by nuns. And this is what happened to her. One day at recess, I was alone, standing with my back against the wall. A group of girls played together, spinning in a circle, all holding hands. I'm not sure how I found myself suddenly in the middle, and they began to close in around me while the girls shouted, dirty little girl, shitty, dirty little girl. The circle closed, and they threw me to the floor and took off the only pair of underwear I owned. Of course, it was dirty. One of the girls, a very fat one, cross-eyed like me, hung my underwear on a broomstick. They marched along, the broomstick held high, forming a long procession through the courtyards, shouting in chorus, the new girl's dirty underwear. I think we all agree this is humiliating. We should also agree children can be very cruel. We should not be too romantic about that. And we will also agree that if you have an experience like this, it will be very difficult to forget this experience. It will be very difficult. Humiliation goes so deep. Let's skip this one. This is a scene from France after the liberation. You know that a number of French women collaborated with the Nazi occupiers. And this is the public humiliation of les collaboratrices after the occupation ended. And shaving a person's hair is an act of humiliation if it happens against the will of the person. There's actually a case in Strasbourg, Yankov versus Bulgaria, where a prisoner, his hair was shaved off, completely shaved off, and he said this was not necessary, and that's why it was humiliating, and the judges agreed with him. So this is an example. I think I have 2 more. This was in 2010. The deputy foreign minister of Israel and the ambassador of Turkey had a clash. So Turkey and Israel had some kind of dispute at the time. If you look at the picture here, it is humiliating in the sense that you do not see the Turkish flag and you see the Turkish ambassador to the right sitting lower. That's humiliating. And don't do it. Don't do it. This one is the famous sofa gate. Ursula von der Leyen to the left, the president of the European Commission, and Michel, the president of the European Parliament, visit Erdogan in Turkey. And maybe you've seen that, it's called Sofa Gate. There was only one chair prepared for the man, And the woman was relegated to the sofa. If you check it out on YouTube, there are a very heated speech by Ursula von der Leyen, and there's a video how she enters the room and sees there's no chair for her. And believe me, this should not happen. This is high protocol. These are high-ranking officials. And many people should have checked the room before that. So this should really not happen. So she said, she's afraid it was intentional, and she's afraid it happened because she was a woman. And because there were meetings where they had 3 chairs. It's not that they have a shortage of chairs in Turkey. And so this is humiliating. Last slide on this one. He's one of my heroes, Hans Blix, a Swedish diplomat who worked for the United Nations and for the Atomic Nuclear Agency. And he turned 80 years and gave this interview. And in the interview, Hans Blix, a seasoned diplomat, said this: "My general reflection from a long diplomatic life is one I always come back to, the importance of avoiding humiliation. I think diplomacy is sometimes associated with exaggerated courtesy, crystal chandeliers, and what have you, but it is not the essence of it. The essence of diplomacy is first to improve relations between states and groups, to make them better and more profitable. The second is to avoid hitches, to avoid exacerbations and conflict. And third, when conflicts arise, to mitigate, reduce, and solve them. Though not all conflicts can be solved by diplomacy, and I accept that. The point I'm trying to get at is, in all situations, do not humiliate the other side, because you don't get anywhere. You make them furious. There are many examples of this, even in vocabulary. When trying to reach solutions, try to use dry concepts and avoid loaded words. This is important. In human relations, humiliation is very dangerous. I can just agree with that, because humiliation goes so deep. And if I ask you, which I won't, do you remember any humiliation you may have suffered yourself? As I said, it's very difficult to forget humiliating experiences. So in most courses I teach, I ask my students in Notre Dame, do you see entry points for humiliation on campus? And for the Notre Dame friends here, I love Notre Dame. I teach a diplomacy course, and the diplomats love to come back because the students are so respectful. I've never been slammed a door on my face because students look around and see when there's somebody behind them. So Notre Dame, what I'm trying to say is a very respectful environment, okay? That doesn't mean that you cannot ask the question, do you see entry points for humiliation? I give you one example. We once did 20 interviews, which is not a whole lot, but it still takes time, with patients at an Austrian hospital. And we asked the patients, where do you see entry points for humiliation in the hospital as patients? And they mentioned 3 things. Number 1, bodily shame. And they said it really can be humiliating if you have to completely undress in front of a stranger, and sometimes you are stark naked in a little cubicle, and there's only a curtain that separates the cubicle from the hallway. If people walk by, the curtain moves and everybody sees you. And they said this is not necessary. If you come to the doctor and say, I have a migraine, the doctor says, well, can you just undress completely, and then we can see the next step? You would say, is this really necessary? Bodily shame. Of course, it has something to do with faith, with generation, with personality, but nonetheless, it was mentioned significantly often. Secondly, lack of privacy. They mentioned not only if you have a 6-bed room in a hospital, everybody can overhear the conversations you have. They also mentioned if you have a bathroom in a 6-bed hospital room and the bathroom is not soundproof, everybody can overhear how you relieve yourself. And they said, well, this is humiliating. And thirdly, objectification. They said the doctor's rounds. When you have the doctor's rounds, there may be 11 people. The first few may be interested, and those who are at the end of the line may not really be interested. And they said everybody stares at the body part that is problematic. It could be a much worse body part than the upper part of my leg, and they forget that there's a person there. What I'm trying to say is it is good to ask in institutions, where do people see entry points for humiliation? Where do they see entry points for humiliation? That doesn't mean that the institution is bad. It doesn't mean that you can really address it satisfactorily. Nobody wants to do away with doctor's rounds. I mean, that's just part of how a hospital runs. But it's good to ask this question. So I ask my students, where do you see entry points of humiliation on campus? And this is what I got. Dignity violations often happen in small, everyday ways. Small moments like assumptions about wealth or casual comments from professors can reinforce feelings of not belonging because of status. So professors can say, you all have been to Europe. And maybe only 10% of the students in the class have been to Europe. So you make those assumptions. Dignity violations are to some degree, one person said, an inevitable reality within an institution that carries a strong cultural identity, in particular Notre Dame stereotype, in an affluent background. For example, dignity violations can occur for non-traditional Notre Dame students who fall outside the stereotype of a Catholic middle to upper class white students. There are pressures to fit in. Junior parent weekend, when the parents come to see their junior child on campus, comes with hidden costs. I once had a student who said, junior parent weekend was so painful for me because my father couldn't come because he's in jail. And so people ask me, where's your father? They ask me, what does your father do? It's not a good answer on Notre Dame's campus to give. My father's in jail. And then he said this was humiliating for him. Welcome weekend and move in, people's ability to afford different items, whether it be for room decor, clothes, experiences. This carries over into school year, and they began to notice many people beginning to group with those of similar income level. Notre Dame, as you know, has a lottery of roommates. So you may end up with a roommate who plays in a completely different socioeconomic league, either much lower or much higher. And then you share basically a room. And that can lead to some embarrassing situations. If you're non-standard, you have to justify your existence. I'll give you a very harmless example. On a football weekend, one of the visitors who came to campus asked me, where is the grotto? And in my broken English, I said, you go down here and then turn right. Instead of saying thank you, the person said, where are you from? It's all right, I'm from Austria. So the point here is, can you justify your existence on campus? He didn't mean anything. What I'm saying here is that's not humiliating, sensu stricto, but there's a moment of you have to do more identity justification work than others where you don't have to place the accent or so. So it's a good question to ask also in a university context. Where are entry points for humiliation? Invisibility of custodial staff. People often act like they aren't really there and don't treat them with basic respect. I've seen people walk into rooms with cleaning staff and just completely ignore them. Similarly, workers in service roles, janitors, groundskeepers, cooks, maintenance staff, often go unnoticed. A striking example is the state of campus restrooms after a long day or class or a busy sports weekend. That's a very interesting point. If you want to get to know aspects of a situation, go and visit the restrooms. They are like visiting cards of an institution. And one of my favorite philosophers at 718, Avishai Bar-Galit, distinguished between ethics and morality in a very idiosyncratic way. For him, ethics is the framework of rules we use to organize our relationships with people we know. Ethics. Rules we use to organize our relationships with people I know, like me and Bernard. That's ethics. Morality is the framework of rules I use to coordinate my interactions with people I do not know. Strangers at the airport, strangers at the railway station, strangers in the supermarket. And his point is these two sets of standards should not be too terribly apart. Meaning you should not treat the stranger very differently than the person you know. Of course, you are friendly with students whom you will teach, who give you their course instructor feedback, on which your merit increase depends, just that you know. Of course, you're friendly to your students. But are you also friendly to people you may never meet again? And he says they should not be too far. So do you treat the restroom in the university very differently from the way you treat the restroom at home? And so that's an indication, which I found interesting. Let's skip that. Let's just read the last one. One colleague said, one particular incident of a dignity violation I heard about, an ordained student whose mother worked as part of the custodial staff on campus, something which he was embarrassed to admit. Although the student attempted to avoid running into his mother throughout his days so that it wouldn't become obvious that he felt such embarrassment, the mother was very aware of this fact. And you can have some subtle situations like these. I once had a student whom I asked in the class, every student to talk about integral human development and their experience with the idea and the role of dignity. And she said when the father left the family, her mother made ends meet by cleaning homes, including homes of her schoolmates, classmates. And that's a sensitive situation, as you can imagine. It's not necessarily humiliating. So I like to say, if I am not properly zipped up, it's embarrassing, but it's only humiliating if you make fun of me and laugh. If I need a bedpan, it's not, it may be embarrassing, but it's not humiliating unless people make fun of me. So there is an additional moment. Not every embarrassing situation is humiliating, but it's good to be sensitive to that. So what does it mean to respect the person's dignity? Be sensitive to these entry points for humiliation in my remaining 4 minutes. This is my hobby. As I told you, this is my hobby. That's Strasbourg, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And this is Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. No one, I mentioned it before, shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And the judges have to decide whether Article 3 was violated, yes or no. And I'm particularly interested in cases where there is no agreement. And I'll give you just one example for time reasons. Bouillet versus Belgium. There was a situation of a 17-year-old young man by the name of Bouillet who locked himself out of his multi-story apartment house and was waiting for family members to come back and let him in. So he was standing in front of his building. In English, there's this interesting word, loitering. Loitering. And it's difficult to say, when does waiting end and loitering begin? Well, I mean, sometimes I'm just waiting for a bus, but I'm not loitering, I'm waiting for the bus. Sadly, the family had already some unfortunate history at the police station. They saw him over there, and he looked suspicious, so they went up and said, what are you doing here? I'm waiting. And they said, can you identify yourself? Well, I normally, when I lock myself out of my house, I don't have my ID with me, so he couldn't. So they took him to the police station to identify himself, to establish his identity, as they said. And he was really provocative. He was not cooperating. He provoked the police officers, and one police officer gave him one hit. One hit, here, just once. Big question, was this an Article 3 violation, yes or no? Yes or no? So a 17-year-old is hit once, like this, at a police station. Yes or no? Article 3 violation. Strasbourg has two instances. First instance said no, then it went to the highest instance, the Grand Chamber, and they said with a majority of 11-3, yes, Article 3 violations. 3 judges, however, said this is not an Article 3 violation. They said what the police officer did is wrong. He should be disciplined. This must not happen. But this is not an Article 3 violation because we deal here with very severe cases and don't want to use dignity violations or Article 3 violations in an inflationary sense. So I'm really interested in that because, as I said, the judges have to decide. Let's skip that, and let's end with this one. So, respecting a person's dignity is very simple, and people know when they're being respected or not. It may be complicated in some situations, but basically it's very simple. Hugo Flores was one of our Master of Global Affairs graduates in 2021, and he gave this lovely speech, and I have 2 slides from his speech. Since we are at Notre Dame, I want to honor the Catholic tradition and its wisdom. The most important teaching in Christianity is the following: whether we believe in Jesus as God, a prophet, or a historical figure is not important. In the Gospel of Mark 12:31, Jesus tells the scribes, when they're asking about the commandments, love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than this. This is supposed to be the single most important teaching of Jesus and the basis of Christianity as a whole. Now, why is it important? Because we can trace all the problems of society back to forgetting this principle. We can also find solutions to society's problems by observing it. Very soon, we'll all be doing influential policy and development work in one area or another. How can this principle guide our work? It is very simple. If we are drafting a piece of policy or designing a project, and it's good enough to apply to ourselves or to our closest ones, then it is a good project. If not, it's not good enough. For example, if we're going to open a clinic, is this clinic good enough that I would send my mother to it when she's sick? If yes, it's good enough. If not, it is not. If we are designing an educational program, is it good enough that I would let my children be trained by it? If so, it's good enough. If not, it's not. If we are setting up a standard of living, a wage, a package of services, is it good enough that we would subject our families to living by these standards? If so, it's good enough. If not, it's not. That's very simple. That's very simple. And this sentence, this could be my mother, is a very important sentence when we think about dignity, respect or dignity violations. Last slide. Dignity is something that has to be nurtured, like watering a plant, by everyday practices. Everyday practices where you respect the person the way that we looked at this particular slide. And lastly, sometimes it is difficult to honor a person's dignity. For example, if the person is an aggressive dementia patient, then we need what I call the deep practice of the human dignity, holding on to the standards of respecting a person as much as you can, even though it may be difficult in this particular situation. Thank you, and 20 minutes for Q&A.
Clemens is a teacher, so he can handle his own Q&A. But I do want to encourage students and everybody else, this is your chance to ask questions. If you're confused about something, ask for clarification. If you disagree with something, disagree, you want to hear more, this is your chance. A number of my students are here. I know that they will take this opportunity, and I'm sure that everybody else will. So, go for it.
We need an icebreaker. Over here, yes, sir. You already said something about, please.
This is wonderful. Thank you very much for being here. Sometimes people talk about dignity. They have a richer concept in mind, and something that celebrates human excellence, right? Usually construed in some sort of objective sense. It seems like most of both in your positive and negative approach, it's a thinner notion of dignity that has a lot to do with freedom and autonomy. I'm wondering if there's room in the kind of picture of dignity that you've fleshed out here to think of dignity in terms of promoting distinctively human excellences, or if that's just a different category and it's sloppy to use the language of dignity in this context.
So I think my first remark would be, I'm not one of those who believe that a solid concept of autonomy can replace our concept of dignity. As you know, there's this lively discourse of dignity is celebratory, solemn, unrealistic, aspirational. We don't need the concept, we need the pragmatic concept of autonomy. And I believe that dignity as a concept can do work that the concept of autonomy cannot. Because it is especially important in areas where the agency of people is limited, or maybe even completely gone in the case of a coma patient. So just as a preface. Where I'm coming from with today's talk is trying to convince people from different faiths and philosophical traditions that this could be a common denominator for us in a global ethics enterprise. So I try to shy away from, can we agree on a justification question? We talk about justification options, but we don't need to move towards a consent, so to speak. I also try to shy away from an achievement-based understanding of dignity, where you say because of these excellent, unique qualities of the human being, we have dignity, and then they give you a list of, and I'm a short person, so I'm a small fan, but I'm at the same time a big fan of Eva Feder-Kitai. And you probably know her name. She's a very well-known philosopher and the mother of a severely disabled daughter, Sasha, who has no measurable IQ. And Eva Kitai, she wrote a number of texts about it, including Learning from My Daughter with OUP, where she said, you know, when I look at what philosophers tell us about the human person and the special features of the human person, they have this list, and my daughter doesn't check any of these boxes. But anyone who encounters my daughter will see, well, of course she's a human being, and she prefers Mozart to Beethoven. I think it's Mozart to Beethoven, which I would also recommend it, not the other way around. And you can see that. So that's why there's something in me that is a little cautious. Third remark, this is not to say that the little I offered would not be able to be enriched by the kind of language in an Alistair McIntyre kind of sense that we could use. As a Christian, well, my line is I'm a Catholic who would try to be a Christian. So as a Catholic and a person who tries to be a Christian, I'm of course interested in the image and likeness of God. What does that mean? And what does that mean about the uniqueness of the person? And I personally like the thought, it takes every single member of the human family to give us a sense of the image and likeness of God. And then you don't have to look for special qualities like color of skin or whatever it may be. I mean, this is all representative. I think that's how I would respond, but I don't see attention in the way that what I offered you is the last word on dignity, and that's where I'm just concerned with a certain pragmatics and a certain, as I said, global ethics common denominator. The pragmatics means I teach integrated human development, and the standard criticism is it's such an aspirational common good. Common good, the flourishing of a community based on the flourishing of each of its members, like a multiplication or an addition, and then they say, well, this is not how the world works. I would like to be able to say, I know, but nonetheless there is pragmatic value in the concept of human dignity or in the concept of the common good. Yes, please.
So, I'm a senior here at John Carroll. I just want to say thank you for all that you have said. I would like you to expand a little bit on how this may contrast or almost compare to the deprivation of human dignity with yourself. How can I deprive myself of my own human dignity? Or how can someone else deprive themselves?
Yeah. The way I see that is if you have a coin, and the coin has two sides, one side would be self-respect, and the other side would be respect that the coin itself is called dignity. So when I say all human beings have human dignity, it includes myself as well. So I owe something to myself, which is called self-respect. And Avijay Margalit, whom I mentioned before, defines humiliation as follows. A person is humiliated if she has reasons to feel violated in her self-respect. Self-respect is the kind of respect I owe to myself on the basis of being human. Not on the basis of being a brilliant student or a US American or whatever else we can say, on the basis of being human. And so I can deprive myself not of human dignity, but I can deprive myself of a lived experience of human dignity, because this is one of the paradoxes. There are many paradoxes with the dignity discourse. One is dignity is inviolable and fragile at the same time. So there is no dignity competition. So we would say that Saddam Hussein did not have less dignity, human dignity, than Mother Teresa. We would not say that. It's the standard discourse is human dignity is not something that. So I sometimes say, if you compare the category of social honor with the category of human dignity, social honor has three features that dignity has not. Number one, social honor is externally allocated. So if you are a Wimbledon winner, somebody tells you you are the Wimbledon winner. Dignity, there is no external authority. And the idea is not that the state tells you, by the way, you have dignity. It's not up to the state to say or not say that. Secondly, social honor is a competitive good. Coming back to Wimbledon, I mean, Notre Dame football. I understand there used to be the possibility of a tie in football. And now the possibility doesn't exist any longer. So there will be one winner at the end of a football game. And if you have the honor of winning, the other one will not have the honor of winning as well. So it's competitive. There's only one Wimbledon winner. And thirdly, social honor can change over time. So we have an interesting person in Austria. He was Minister of Interior Affairs. Then he, because of a corruption case, ended up in jail. And then out of jail, he bought a hotel and is now running a hotel. So social honor was like this, and it was like this, and now it's somewhere in the middle. So it changes over time, not so with human dignity. So this is where I would say you cannot deprive yourself of dignity sensu stricto. But of course you can deprive of your sense of your own dignity. And you can also be convinced that if you have self-respect, you would not bring yourself to doing certain things if you have a choice. So out of self-respect, you may not do X, Y, and Z. And then we have religious martyrs who would say, I rather die than do X, Y, and Z. So I don't know whether this is what you're aiming at, but one of the paradox of dignity is I cannot be deprived of dignity per se, but I can be treated in a way as if I did not have dignity, and I can be deprived of my sense of dignity. And part of torture, of course, is to make a person lose self-respect and belief in herself. So I asked 3 sessions ago my international students, do you have experienced an example of dignity violation as a witness, basically in your professional context? So I was not trying to say, tell me about your terrible experiences. Basically, have you come across a dignity violation in your professional context? And one journalist from Venezuela said, in 2018, a congressman was detained by the government and then tortured, drugged, and then they had a video of him in a drugged state where he confessed to his crimes. And everybody could see that he was drugged. And the video is out there, and I'm afraid everybody in the world can watch it. And this is something I would say, this is humiliating. It will be very difficult for him once he finds out to keep his sense of self-respect, knowing that millions of people have access to this kind of video. He has not lost his dignity, but he has clearly lost the sense of dignity, and part of what I think he needs to have this kind of self-respect. Over here, yes, please. Oh, sorry, please. If that's okay, please. Is it a violation of dignity if you bring yourself to a lower level?
To make yourself go higher, to get better.
I try to understand the question. So where I am is already low enough. So I'm not trying to be cynical. So in the Catholic tradition, we sometimes talk about humility as an important virtue. And some people think humility means making yourself smaller than you are. And my response is, we are small enough as human beings. I'm certainly small enough, so I don't need to make myself smaller than I actually am. There's enough room for improvement, enough necessity for me trying to bring myself up or ask God to help me go up. So I don't think that bringing myself down intentionally would help me getting up. But there is certainly a sense of going back to the self-respect question. If you have a sense of your dignity, you would not want to be treated as a non-human person. You want to be treated as a human person. And part of a human person is you are much more than the role that you have at this point. At the same time, what I skipped was this slide. If you remember, the most colorful slide of my whole presentation. I told Bernard over our dinner, one of my heroes is Janusz Korczak. He was a Polish pediatrician and director of an orphanage and lived from 1878 to 1942. And then he was the director of the orphanage in Warsaw, in the Warsaw Ghetto. And he could have escaped, stayed with the children, and was killed with the children. And Janusz Korczak always said, children have a right to respect. This is one, the child's right to respect. And he meant by that a child has the right to be respected in where the child is right now. Quite often we ask, and I remember this question, what do you want to become when you are grown up? And the message by this question is, right now you are nothing, and at some point we hope that you grow up and become somebody. And as Korczak says, you are a child, you are already someone, you're a full human being, you live in a full human world, and you have a right to today and the right not to be defined by the future only. So I think I would rather see it this way. I honor a person's dignity by telling the person, you don't have to betray who you are. Be who you are, and that's one important way of respecting a person. I think that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
I was going to ask, you said earlier that dignity, respecting it is simple, but it can get complicated. What would you say is, what would you say puts dignity most at risk? Would it be like things like hate or frustration? Or
So I think what puts dignity most at risk is the intersection of institutions and the human body. So most of the cases I'm interested in deal with institutions such as prisons or courtrooms or schools or clinics or psychiatric clinics, refugee camps, detainment centers, those kinds of institutions. And here the risk of dignity violations comes with the human body. And you all know Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault in the 1970s worked a lot on the question how institutions can control our bodies. And so there are certain chairs here, and there is not much else you can do. The architect here controls your body when you sit here. And in our primary schools in Austria, we tell the children we start at 7:55 and you have to sit for 50 minutes. And so the school controls the body. Hospitals even more so. And we see a lot of these dignity violations happen at the intersection of the vulnerable, defenseless human body in an institutional setting where you have a power asymmetry. And quite often it's prisons. And you have many cases of overcrowded prisons. You have cases of strip searches. You have cases, I mentioned the one where you get your hair shaved off. And I think this is where it gets really delicate and the risk of a dignity violation increases with the institutionalization and the power asymmetry between institution and individual and the vulnerable body a person may have. And the vulnerability increases if you have a delicate body. So we had this case Price versus United Kingdom where a woman who was wheelchair bound, or was a wheelchair user, I should say, was a wheelchair user. She was not a nice person, I think. So she was fined for contempt of court. And since she refused to pay the fine, the judge told her she has to spend a week in prison. And that was a Friday afternoon. And he said, arrest right away. And so she was brought to a police station and not a proper prison. So she basically spent the night in a police station prison cell, which is not prepared for persons who need a wheelchair. So her body was especially vulnerable because she needed a special infrastructure to clean herself, to go to the bathroom, and that was not available. So that was an Article 3 violation. So the higher the institutionalization, the bigger the asymmetry between institution and an individual in terms of power, and the more vulnerable the person, the higher the risk for a dignity violation. And there's also something called the dignity resource pattern. And that means if you have an institution that is well resourced, the likelihood of dignity violations go down. So when I was at King's College London, we had the Mid-Staffordshire hospital scandal. What happened in 2009 was they discovered in a particular hospital, Mid-Staffordshire, that between 2005 and 2009, probably 1,500 excess deaths had happened. Deaths that should not have happened, but because of the understaffing, and the understaffing happened for economic reasons, the patients were just not treated according to their dignity. People were left with their excrements, people were not dressed properly, people were basically, I mean, if you cannot move your hands and a person puts food in front of you, runs away to the next patient, comes back after half an hour, just sees that you haven't touched the food and said, oh, you didn't like it, this is, of course, not good. Under-resourced institutions, understaffed institutions have, of course, a higher risk of dignity violations. So really, the intersection of institution and human body, that's where I see the highest risks. One last question? Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned dignity hysteria, and I thought that was really interesting. So I guess my question is, like, does the idea of dignity hysteria like move us into a direction where we are afraid to like elevate the definition, like the base level of human dignity? Like in the court cases they were talking about where they were afraid to label it as a violation of human dignity because doing so would like water down the definition of dignity. Is it so bad if we move to a place where just in general everybody has a much higher standard? Like obviously not to an extreme where like anything you do is a dignity violation, but like setting that bar a little higher, like I don't know, what do you think about that?
Dieter Birnbacher famously called dignity a conversation stopper. And by that he meant, when you tell me you just violated my dignity, I wouldn't know what to say. It's like this, I'm very sorry that I did that. I don't think that you would like to raise the standards up to a level where people lose interest in following it. So my approach would be this. It is good to have different categories, and you can say something is wrong, but it doesn't mean that it's already a dignity violation. So you can say, let's say in the case of Fred, it was wrong. The grandmother should not have done that. But I don't think that it qualifies as something which I would preserve as a precious category, which means a lot when I use it. So you all know the word grade inflation. And grade inflation means that if everybody gets the A is worthless. And you don't want that with the term dignity violation. You don't want that every embarrassing situation is seen as a dignity violation, because then the semantics of the concept is wearing out and the concept cannot do any work for us any longer. So I would like us to see something can be wrong, something can be unacceptable, something can be inappropriate, but it's not a dignity violation, but I still have an instrument, so a toolbox to say, I reject that, I don't want this to happen, I would like to make sure that there's an infrastructure in place that this will not be repeated. But dignity violation, for me, dignity is really one of those terms that you don't want to throw around. You want to say everybody has dignity, so in this case you throw it around. But you don't want to say that every situation is dignity violation. And what the judges said was they were not afraid to call something a dignity violation. Their point is basically, they do not use the dignity language too much in Strasbourg. They talk about Article 3 violations. Article 3. And as you have seen, Article 3 does not contain the word dignity. But it's as close as it gets to dignity. And they would say, you don't want to construe Article 3 in a way that every little something is an Article 3 violation. I'll give you one example. I know we're running out of time. When you arrest a person, there is, they said, a necessary aspect of degrading in the arrest of a person. It's not pleasant to be arrested, but there is a necessary element where the person should not play the, oh, you violated my dignity card if you're handcuffed. And sometimes, and we talked about safety considerations, sometimes you have to constrain a person's freedom for good reasons. So they would say as well, Article 3, there is a threshold. And the threshold has to be high enough that not every unpleasant experience can be called an Article 3 violation. And that's where I would come in. And that's why I also brought the Fred example, because if you live your life, every single day of your life, it has to work. And you may be able to have an amazing high standard for 2 days or 2 hours, the first 3 days of the new year, but then it will be very difficult to hold on to that. And so New Year's resolutions, they have to be realistic. I mean, so when students say, I want to have a new life, I want to get up 1 hour earlier every day. We say, 10 minutes, start with 10 minutes. You can always think, but start with 10 minutes. It has to be realistic. And that's how I see also the discourse on human dignity. Because otherwise, people would tell me it's the same with the common good. It's so far up that I lose the motivation even walking in this direction. That's where I'm coming from. Okay, thank you.
Well,